The hour of 2:30 having arrived. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good, good. I'm glad. It's funny because as people were filtering in, I felt that I was back in time and everybody was sitting in back. So just remember, if you're coming again this evening, feel free to sit up front. You don't always have to sit in the back. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting or knowing, I'm Tom O'Brien. I don't know what my big claim to fame might be other than that I served as a state rep here in Kingston from 1996 to 2006. I tease my successor, our great state rep, Tom Coulter, and say those were the golden years, not just because I was there, but because the state had money. We were able to do a lot of things. You may recall during those 10 years, we built 2 new schools, we refurbished a school, we built a town hall, we built a senior center. So a lot happened during those 10 years. The economy was better, and it was prior to the Great Recession. My timing may not be all that great because in 2006, I had the opportunity to become the Plymouth County Treasurer. So let's leave the legislature exactly 1 year before the greatest recession that America's known since the Great Depression to become the treasurer of Plymouth County. Fortunately, we've been able to weather that storm and things are going very well at Plymouth County. And I've been serving as the Plymouth County Treasurer for 10 years now. And I'm thrilled to be here to serve really just as the moderator. That is my sole goal and function today, to help facilitate any questions, to make sure people get an opportunity to say whatever they might want to say, to ask questions that they might want to ask. And somebody was kind enough to say, Tom, thank you so much for being here. And I had to respond and simply say, well, Sia was smart, and we all know Sia Stewart. If anybody doesn't, then you're not getting out enough. But Sia was kind enough to call me a long time ago and say, we're going to have these forums. Would you mind serving as a moderator? And I said, Sia, I would be happy to do that. And so she had it in my calendar, and she then called with a date well ahead of time. It's better than folks that give me a jingle, and this does happen. Say, Tom, are you available to help with whatever or to attend a particular session or particular function, which, of course, I always want to try to do. And I say, sure, when is it? And they say, tomorrow. That gets a little hard to squeeze into my calendar. But I'm excited to be here because, obviously, I love the town of Kingston. I think we do a lot of things great. I think our library is one of those resources. I certainly think that a jewel, and part of that, of course, is Sia. I was chatting with Sia earlier and couldn't believe I asked how long she's been here at the Kingston Public Library, and she reminded me it's been 26 years. And we are so very lucky to have that type of consistency, that type of dedication, and that type of commitment to this community. And so anytime she asks, I'm always happy to be here. I'm excited about this project, too, because having served as a state rep, I know that these opportunities don't come along every day. And so the town has a lot of things they have to look at, a lot of things they have to consider. Obviously, very real concerns across the board about projects that the town is considering, that the town has done, that the town will be looking at in the future. But when the state offers money, which doesn't always happen, it's really something that the town needs to consider seriously and look at seriously. I know some of our big successes back to those golden years from 96 to 2006 were getting monies to purchase some open space. And so there are 5 large tracts of land here in the town of Kingston, and people may or may not know this, ranging from the Kelleher property to some of the property over by Silver Lake that was paid for 50%, 60% by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under a program called the SANS grant. And one of the reminiscences I have about my time up in the legislature was my colleagues asking how we were able to get so much money to come back to the town of Kingston. And I told them, of course, they had a great state representative. But the truth of the matter is we had really dedicated people in the town of Kingston, ranging from our Board of Selectmen to committed activists to committed folks that were concerned about the ecology of the town and the future of the town and to protect these open spaces. And so I liken that to our opportunity here with the library, an opportunity that doesn't come along. I can tell you the state isn't very profligate, and that's a good thing. But they recognize the value of these resource centers in our communities, and that's really what libraries are. And so they have a bond that they've put together, and there are a number of communities on the waiting list, and we are one of 9 to be fortunate enough to have received this grant opportunity. So this presentation is a chance for Sia and the team to talk a little bit about where we're at, what's happened. Please understand, and if you have a moment, think about this. This doesn't happen overnight. This is something that Sia and the library trustees and the Library Foundation and the town of Kingston and its citizens have been working on for a long time. It's a conversation that has been happening really for 3 or 4 years. So we're not here just because somebody had this idea. It's something that's been worked on for a while. So what I ask, Sia's making the presentation, is that you give her your utmost attention, that we listen to everything that is said, formulate questions, write them down. Let's let her get through what she needs to. I'll hop back up, and then we'll field some questions. Sound like a fairly good game plan for everyone? Excellent. So without further ado, our chief librarian, Sia Stewart.
Thank you so much. Tell me if you can't hear me. Am I speaking into the mic? Can you hear me all right? Okay. Oh, that's right. That's for your benefit. Okay, let me try harder. And do remind me if I get quiet. I am kind of soft-spoken. So when you came in, you were probably handed a copy of this sheet that's titled, "Did you hear the good news about the Kingston Public Library?" And this is a fact sheet that gives you some of the facts about the project. So I hope you'll take a look at that. But there's so much information to share that I'm going to do my very best not to overload you, but I want to get out answers to some of the questions I know are out there already. So I'm really excited to be here because, as Tom says, we've been working on this project. I have known that we needed a larger building for a long time. I would say 2010 we started informally gathering information, and 2012 is when the Board of Selectmen formed the first committee, the Library Needs Assessment Committee. So citizens have been looking at this project for all of that time. So what is the opportunity and why now? And I'm not going to read from that, but you can look at that while I'm telling you other things. The opportunity is that the state has awarded Kingston a $6.9 million grant. We were in the first group of projects to be funded out of 33 applicants. Placement in the first group does mean that the state recognized that Kingston's need for a new library is very strong, and the solution we've proposed is also very strong. To accept this grant and move ahead with this project, Kingston residents need to vote at a special town meeting on November 14th to move the project forward to a ballot vote. The ballot will, the special election, townwide election, will be on December 5th. If the town doesn't accept this grant, the grant then goes to another municipality. The funding leaves Kingston, goes to the next town on the list. The grant comes from a state bond, and that's important for you to know. The state is already investing $150 million of your taxes in library building projects in other towns. So my thinking is it would be a good thing for some of that money to come back to Kingston because you're already paying for library projects in other towns. Kingston is at a point where the town has to decide whether to build a new library or invest or do something with this existing building. The current library building has some real issues, and that will require a significant investment to address those issues. There's an opportunity now to get state funds to help Kingston solve these problems, and if we say no to this grant, we are saying yes to coming back to a future town meeting with a request for funding for repairs and upgrades. So one of the things for you to consider is, where would you like to spend your money? Construction costs are rising rapidly at a rate of 5 to 7% every year. Building a new library will not get any less expensive if we wait. If another grant is offered, it won't be any earlier than 2022. The project budget includes all the costs, including furnishings, the cost of moving into and out of temporary quarters during the construction phase, as well as fitting out temporary leased quarters to serve as a library while we need to be in them. It also includes escalation of the costs to account for when this project is expected to go out to bid if the project moves forward. The total project cost is $15,859,420. The state grant pays about 43.45% of that, $6,893,430,000. Local funding that's needed is $8,965,990. The capital campaign that the Kingston Public Library Foundation has started has set a goal of $500,000 to help offset some of the debt. Sorry. So the opportunity is now to take advantage of this funding to build a new library. If the town chooses to go another direction and not build a new library, the town can certainly do that, but there is not an option not to spend money on repairs to a building. The impact on taxes, I had hoped that Town Treasurer Ken Stevens would be able to be here today, but he wasn't able to be here. But he did tell us last night that he is proposing borrowing the local funds over 20 years. For the average homeowner with a home valued at $363,490, the total cost over 20 years would be $2,558.63. The highest tax impact would be in 2020 at $171.76. or $42.94 per quarter, followed by a gradual reduction in cost to $90.48 or to $22.62 per quarter in 2040. The plan is structured this way to keep overall borrowing cost as low as possible. This is not, I have to say though, that this plan has not been finally decided on. That is what he's proposing. So you want to know why a new library is needed, I'm sure. Since the new library, quote, opened in 1994, Kingston's population has grown by 50% from 9,045 to 13,568 at the most recent census. Library visits more than doubled from 27,690 to 77,342. Borrowing has nearly tripled from 49,546 items a year to 142,986 items a year. There are currently more than 5,528 active cardholders. We add 40 to 60 new registrations every month. So in these slides, you can see some of the problems with the existing building. There's not enough space for people or collections. There are unsafe conditions. There are areas that are inaccessible and violate code. There are areas of the building that are inaccessible to some current members of the library staff. And if you stay for the tour, I'll show you what those areas are. So you'll see tight conditions. You'll see people having to crouch down to get to books that are shelved on the lower shelves. This woman here is working on a project right out in the open because there is no quiet study space or workspace for her to work on a project. There are times when the building is extraordinarily crowded, and this is an example of a space that, sorry, I'm pointing to this and not to that. To the far side, the woman studying over on the right in the gallery is she's studying in a space where it's one of the few relatively quiet spaces in the building. It's also the place where we house our books on CD collection, and it's also where our art gallery is. And it's also where toddlers race up and down. So it's a well-used space, but not conducive to studying. There really isn't enough space for multiple uses of the children's room. There's a lot of overlapping use. You can see the young man building whatever that is, connects. And so we can hold some programs. We hold programs in this room. But large programs must be held off-site, and that's really, there are problems with that. Part of the problem with that is people can't, there's no one-stop shopping. People can't come here and have a program and go pick up their books and go get advice and go get reference help or get homework help when we have to hold programs off-site. There are definitely safety problems to do with wiring. You can see the curb at the front entrance is a tripping hazard. You can see a staff member reaching very high to try to retrieve material from from an upper shelf. We have stools that people can stand on. They're not safe for many people, so that's something we would try to avoid. We would avoid in a new, larger building. We have programming problems too. There aren't enough seats near power outlets for people who use laptops and tablets. There is not enough meeting space to meet the demand. We don't have tutoring or quiet study space, and there's a big demand for both of those things. So you heard the numbers. The building we have now has served the town really well for the more than 20 years it was designed for, or for more than the 20 years it was designed for. We've made efficient use of all the space we have. If you ask staff, if you ask volunteers who come in to shelve books, you will hear tales of, well, we can't put this on the shelf because there's no room for it on the shelf, so it goes back to sit on a cart for a while. There's also, when I take you on the tour, those of you who are interested, you'll see what passes for a teen space is really not big enough for anything but browsing the collection. It's not big enough for teens to sit down and socialize. It's not big enough for them to study. It's woefully inadequate. 25% of the collections that we have are inaccessible to the public without staff assistance, either because they're shelved too high or too low, or because they're not or there's no room for them on the shelves at all. And so we have an overflow storage space, and you need staff assistance to get materials out from there. Other issues, the HVAC, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system is in continuous need of repair. The roof is near the end of life. Those things aren't necessarily connected with space, but they are things that the town will have to address. So a library is a place to explore ideas. It's a place to dive into imagination. It's a place to research. It's a place to gather. It's a community space that's not age restricted, where anyone can visit, meet your neighbors, feel safe, not have to spend money when you go visit, get assistance from trained and helpful staff. In a larger building, we can offer quiet study space, active program space, social space, technology training, and we can partner with the community to offer more innovative programs and training. The current building is just too small for that. A library is also a place, a community with a good library is some place that people want to move to. They want to live there. And so I think it really helps enhance the quality of life for everybody in town. Perhaps now, more than ever before, the library offers a necessary common ground for receiving information and sharing human connections to an environment that welcomes us all. And you'll know, all you have to do is walk around and see how much time people spend on screens now. There's human connection suffers. It's a real issue in society these days. A library is a place where people get together and gather and form a community. One of the questions I know is out there is there are other places in town. We talk about needing more meeting space. There are other places in town, other buildings where people can meet and hold programs, and that's true. Why do we need more at the library? There is meeting space in other buildings in town, at the Townhouse, the Adams Center, the Reed Building, and those are all really useful places. However, holding library programs outside the library is fine for certain events, but it's inefficient and ineffective to do this for all large programs. For example, families and teens attending programs at the library can borrow books and ask for help from the librarians while they're here. That connection is broken when we have to hold programs in another building. It's also true for people of all ages attending trainings and meetings and other programs at the library. The fact that the library is a staffed space with many resources means that even for small meetings and study groups, people can make use of the library's expertise and resources before, during, and after programs. You can't do that when meetings and programs are held off-site. It's also true that we're not just talking about meeting space. We're talking about space for programs, space for training, space for studying, space for small conferences, small business meetings. So there are lots of things that are encompassed when we talk about needing more space. So Tom and I both talked about the fact that this is a long this project's been in the works for a very long time. A lot of people have worked on this. A lot of your neighbors and friends have worked on this. And we have held a lot of meetings. And we've conducted surveys. We have done our best to listen to the community to hear what you want in your library. And those ideas have been folded into the proposal that is coming before you at town meeting. The proposal is for a single-story building with good sight lines for the greatest building efficiency and to make it manageable by a small staff. The proposal is also to have a community wing that's available after hours, as is this meeting room, but more space in the new building. The drawings that you'll see are conceptual. That means they are very preliminary. They're solid enough to base a cost estimate on, but there is a lot of room for design development and a lot of room for further community input into what you want your library to be. So the timeline is, we've been working on this since, I think 2013's wrong, I think it's 2012. We've been working on this and finding out what the community wants and asks for. The proposal now is to accept the grant and approve local funding at town meeting on November 14th, and then vote in the ballot, the townwide ballot on December 5th. If this passes, the rough timeline is design development, which is where you have a chance to give input into what the building should be, takes about a year. The bidding process is about 2 months, and then construction, during which time we would move to temporary quarters, is about 18 months. And we hope the future is a new library for Kingston. This plan is just shows you where the existing building is, and then if you could see a red line, thin red line surrounding the building. That is the limit of buildable area. And this plan is the new library, and there's an enlargement of this plan out in the lobby that you are welcome to take a look at. On the right, the sort of orange shaded section, that's the community wing, and the proposal as it looks right now, the proposal is for that to be available and open to the community after hours. So we think, there's a large meeting room. There is a smaller meeting room. There are places to sit, and it will be separated by a glass. Temporary. I don't know what you call it. Temporary curtain, a metal curtain, I guess, separating the community after hours space from the rest of the library. Again, these drawings are conceptual. These are some ideas of what the building could look like. We're eager to hear your thoughts about what you would like it to look like. So, if you would like to see this project move forward, the next steps are be involved, talk to your neighbors, provide input as we improve the project, and attend town meeting on November 14th at 6:30 at KIS and vote. And also vote in the special election on December 5th. And that's the end of my formal presentation. So
this is where I earn my salary. I'm half convinced that's why they asked me to moderate. Not only am I available, the price is right, free. And I always look forward to that opportunity. I sat there and wrote down at least 6 questions, but you don't want to hear my questions. We want to hear your questions. That's my job. We are being recorded on PACTV, and so this will play. I'm sure they'll let us know when it will be, and I probably should have said we should make sure our cell phones are all silenced. But if you do have a question, it's going to be helpful because I'm sure your question is one that many have. If you wouldn't mind just going to the microphone. Is that microphone movable, or do they need to come up to the stand? They should. I hate to have it so formal, and I apologize for that because this is intended to be a little bit more informal, but we do want the good folks at PACTV to get good sound. So without any further ado, are there any, I will say this before I entertain the first question. I have the chance now as the Plymouth County Treasurer to go to 27 communities. And for those of us, Vanessa and I were chatting earlier, Plymouth County is a lot bigger than you think it is. It runs from Hull to Mattapoisett, over to Brockton, down to Plymouth, Wareham. So I've traveled around. And I really have to commend Sia, her staff, the town, the folks on the library foundation, the folks on the study committee, the folks that are on the library board as well. I have, and I can say this with a very high degree of certainty, I have never seen a project as well vetted, as well presented, with as many opportunities for the public to be involved as this one. The one complaint I hear, whether it's in Hull or Mattapoisett or Abington or Rockland, when a project comes forward, people in town say, how come I didn't know about this? Or I didn't have enough information? Or I'm hearing about this at the last minute. I'll say that this is one project. No one in the town of Kingston can say there wasn't an opportunity to ask questions, to get information, to learn. And so this is one of many. I know it won't be the last. We have one this evening. You're all welcome to come back. The evening event is at 6:30, and so we're hoping that you may find this riveting enough that you want to come back. I'll offer a different introduction. I'll tell different stories, so that'll make it a little more interesting. But at this point, we want to hear questions that you folks have, observations. It's a chance for you to say anything that's on your mind. And if not, I'll start with the first question. Yes, Ms. Alberti. Do you want to come up and stand with me, since we all know who's going to answer most of the questions?
My name is Mary Alberti, and I've had the honor with my family to be in Kingston for over 40 years. So we've been able to see the growth of the town, and watch the different facilities being used, discarded, built, and used again. I watched as the Adams Center was a library. My children grew up there, going up the spiral staircase and down to the children's room. And then it was moved because of lack of space over to what was then the telephone company, correct? And retrofitted for that. And now we're 20 years down the road. And my concern is, well, first I have a question that maybe you can answer is, do we have a sense of the trajectory of growth for our town over the next 20 years? If we've grown 50% since 1994, what are we going to look like in 20 years? And do we want a building that's just going to last us another 20 years? Or do we want to build a legacy building that will last for much longer than that if our town continues to grow? My other concern is the architectural look of it. We are a New England town. We base our character on our history. And I just wonder if we could be looking at a little bit more of a traditional design that might blend with the Adams Center and the center of town. So those are my two concerns.
See ya?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Mary. The project numbers are based on a mandatory, you must plan for at least 20 years. That's the grant requirement. So the projected 2035 population is 15,345. It was at least at the time we wrote the grant. So that's an answer to that. And the current population is 13,568. So I'm confident that this building will go well beyond the 20 years that we were required to plan for. There is opportunity for expansion, not out, but up. And with regard to the look of the building, I think that is an area where there are a lot of people who agree, and I think that we need to hear from people about what sort of look they want the building to have. The floor plan is excellent. The floor plan meets all of the needs in the building program. What there is a lot of room, there's still room to change it around as long as it still meets that program, but there is a lot of room to change the exterior, change the look of it. So yeah, thank you for voicing that.
Thank you. And if you're coming to the mic and you wouldn't mind just saying your name, that'd be great.
I'm Susan Sherman, and I live on Main Street. And like Mary, I've been here all my life, and my family has. I have many questions, including one for you.
Excellent. Do you want to start with me or end with me?
No, I'll start with you.
Okay.
You say the state is offering us money. I get tired of this. I get tired of hearing free money and offering us money. This is our money. We pay taxes on this. Would you care to tell us how much we've paid into this for that $6 million or whatever it is? What portion? I mean, it just seems to me this free money has got to stop. It was intended to circumvent Prop 2.5, if I believe I'm correct, right?
No, but how
Well,
about I answer the question?
Okay, go ahead.
So you may want to sit because I tend to be a little bit wordy, and I apologize for that.
I have several others, too, so I'll sit next to you.
Perfect. Who wouldn't want to do that? As Sia had mentioned, and I'm glad that you point out the phraseology. It's always important to talk about that. And sometimes those of us moderating tend to be more glib than we should be with the language. It's a bond authorization. So the state isn't raising taxes. They decided that these projects were worthy enough of going out and bonding. So the state is borrowing money, and this particular bond is $150 million. Now, it's a bond that was bonded a few years ago for these projects around the state specifically. So it's a borrowing. So it's already happened. So that money is now available, and the state has determined through the legislature and the administration that this $150 million is to be spent on libraries in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Can't be spent on anything else. Now, we may have other priorities, roads, bridges. and things, but the state has made this a priority. So the money is available for those projects only through a bond authorization. What I can tell you, having served up there for 10 years, is that if the town of Kingston decides that this is not a project they want to move forward with, and they don't want to access this bond money, that's probably a better way to phrase it, then it will go to another project. It will go to another town because there's a waiting list. And so I think the point I was trying to make, and Sia did a little more artfully, is that our opportunity to access this money is now. And if you miss the opportunity to access, it will go elsewhere. Did that answer that question?
Yes.
Okay,
I
good.
still-
So I'm off the hot seat and the rest are from
I
Sia?
still have a problem with free money and offering
Well,
money.
notice I didn't say free money the second time.
No, you did not. You did not, and I appreciate that. Okay, second, I believe we should applaud Sia. I mean, she has held this building together, and I do applaud that, with the exception of that step outside, which I think should have been fixed many thousands of years ago. So that I will applaud. So many times people, and I say this from experience being on FinCom, so many times people come before us wanting a new building, and they have totally trashed their building or not taken care of it. And I personally, as a taxpayer, resent that, and Sia is not of that at all, and I'm glad. I'm disappointed in several issues. Number one, I see on your list, number 2 would be to go to FinCom. I'd like to know where FinCom stands on this right away. And here we're talking about something, once again, I think we've gotten ahead of ourselves. You want to speak to that? Good. I'm still here, though. I've got more.
Sure, yeah. So we were waiting, and FinCom was also waiting until
Okay.
we had the tax numbers. We have an appointment to meet with them next Thursday, the 19th.
And the reason I say this is because FinCom doesn't just look at this project. They look at everything in the town, and that's what is so important. Back to this, so FinCom, the state bond. I'm still not sure. Oh, my history. I didn't step foot in this library for many years when it first moved here, and I live right up there on Main Street. And it was because I was so appalled. Mrs. Adams gave us that beautiful center, and we rushed into buying the telephone building. And I think we could have done something with that building and continued off on the back and made it a complete center with the Reed. And I still have the sense, and I'm sorry to say this, because believe me, I would love to see a beautiful library too, but I still have the sense we're rushing. Now we have money in our hands and we're rushing. And I think that this is where I would like to slow us down in every aspect of the town, building, traffic, speeding, all of it. So I just am concerned. Yes, I know that we're going to lose that money if we don't go, but here we are again rushing into it. They're going to sell the telephone company if we don't take it. Rush into it. It's been so many cases of that. Rush into taking the police station. You know, build that when it really was designed for something other than a police station, apparently, or so I've been told. I don't know. So there's no great answer here, except I believe we should put money into this building. Unfortunately, it's not across the street that we're putting money into, from my point of view. I think we have to do it. I don't know that I think that it has to be 15 million, particularly, sadly to say, when we need a police station, we need 2 roofs on the buildings down at the elementary school at almost 5 million each. I mean, we have lots of things coming up, and I'm sorry to say that. Plus, I still don't see a picture of what it's going to look like. I think that we're rushing again, and I don't see what everybody needs to hear, which is the Finance Committee saying whether we can afford it and where our taxes are going to go with it. I mean, all of you must know our taxes are up. They're up. So these are my concerns, but I do applaud you, Sia. I think you've done a wonderful job at the library, and I'm sure that do not stand here alone saying we wish that we could give you a new library and do this, but I just get concerned with the numbers, and I still don't know that we know the numbers. So, thank you.
So if it's okay, Sia, I'll take a couple of those.
Oh, you got a couple?
And thank you for the questions and the thoughts, and we do want other folks to have an opportunity. I'll just offer this observation from, unfortunately, more years in public service than I care to admit, especially when I have students that I did an Eagle Scout ceremony for 20 years ago as their state representative, and they're now saying, "Hello, Mr. O'Brien, how are you?" as they pat me on my head as they go by. Whatever happened in the past, and I wasn't here when the decision was made to buy this building and the decisions made with the Adams Library, I think is probably insurmountable in turning back the clock. I don't think you'll see an opportunity for the Adams Center to ever be a library. And I think what is impressive from what I've seen in the work that Sia and the team have done is that they have really tried to figure out the best way to reutilize a space. One of the things that amazes me as I go around is people are always looking for new places, bigger space, more land. The only thing that two quick observations, and then Sia will have some comments. The one thing that I will just observe is that the comment that this is being rushed is somewhat unique to me, because I will tell you, having seen projects rushed in town, this one hasn't been. It really hasn't. Sia has pointed out she's been working on this since 2013. I've attended sessions years ago about this. So I go to towns that bring things together into fruition in a year's time. This has been something that's thoughtful. The other point, which is a good one, the town has other needs. And how do you always balance those needs is a really difficult decision. Unfortunately, challenges that other projects may have shouldn't necessarily get in the way of what may be needed by the town in this instance. I'm really glad that Sia, but I think the whole library board deserves a lot of recognition for their work and their time and their effort in putting this together. I don't think they're coming in front of us quickly or without due thought and due consideration for this project. And I think the state has recognized that by putting us toward the top of the grant opportunity. So those are just some thoughts I wanted to share. I know Sia has a few more things she wants to add. Sia?
Yeah, Susan, I didn't write down all your questions, so I might miss some things. But when the town bought this building and remodeled it in 1994, they bought it in 1991, just before I started working here. It took 3 years to get the funding and get the design to remodel this building. And the town did that for $1.2 million. And it was expected to last 20 years. It's gone beyond that now. I think the town got an amazing deal for $1.2 million. And I think, yay, I mean, we've really made good use of it, and it has served the town really well. But I think the time has passed when we can do more with it. We did look at, in the process of doing the planning and design for this project, coming up with this proposal, we did look at reusing this building. We looked at reusing part of it, or reusing all of it, and expanding on the same lot. We also looked at other sites in town, but keeping the discussion just to this part, we did look at that. What we found was that there was not a significant difference. There was some difference, but not a lot of difference in cost to build a new library or to reuse this building and make it big enough to serve the needs of the town. It was also going to result in a building that wasn't flexible enough to adapt to the changes in the way people use libraries and the way we expect they will continue to change. There were a number of design considerations and financial considerations that resulted in this proposal. So I don't remember what other questions you asked.
Well, I just want to see if there are other questions, and we'll circle back, because then I won't be doing my job.
Could I just address one other point that was made here. I'm hearing.
And just if we could just have an introduction again.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ellen
okay.
Cook. And here I'm hearing a lot about we're rushing ahead and we don't know what this building is going to look like. We had a grant to do the grant. We had a grant that would fund the building study committee and to build conceptual designs, and that's what it was there to fund. So we have a conceptual design. We know that the interior works. All of us are admitting we don't know what the exterior is going to look like yet because no architect is going to come forward and provide this for nothing. We need to accept the grant and we need to raise the money to hire the architect that is going to finalize those plans for us to know what it's looking like. So it's not necessarily rushing ahead. We can't put the horse before the cart unless somebody knows a pro bono architect that's going to draw something up for us very quickly. And again, many years and hours have gone into the study, so I don't feel like we're rushing with it. But I hope other people realize there's just so much you can do before you have the full funding.
Are there other questions? People that have thoughts or observations? Yes, sir.
Bill Underhill, Nottingham Drive. I just want to say that one of the nicest features of this building is the garden that's enclosed by the building. And I would hope that that kind of feature could be built into the proposed design.
See, is that part of the proposed design?
It is. You are not alone in that. That's a feature that many people love. In this building, it functions to, it's our only source of natural light, and it's a delightful one. And people are really fond of it. So yes, that is part. It's not, what we've proposed is not a full courtyard, but there's a reading garden. So it will be a similarly pleasant space to look out on and use, not just look at.
Yes, sir.
Mark Grimison, and I read somewhere or saw somewhere something about a cafe that was either going to be or not going to be.
Cafe.
No, there's not a cafe.
Good, there's enough Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
One on every corner.
It was really a mislabeling. It was always intended to be a place where people could sit with their cup of coffee. It was never a food service. So no cafe.
You'll learn something new every time. There will be no cafe. Any other questions that people have, or thoughts or observations? This is intended to be freewheeling. I've been permitted about an hour, so we still have a few more minutes before we begin the tour. Then I'm allowed to rest for a little bit before the evening session. Yes?
I'm Janice King, and I would just like to settle the question once and for all. The design that we were shown is not carved in stone, correct? And there will be an opportunity for members of the community to put in their 2 cents,
Yes,
and they will be listened to,
they will.
and changes will be made,
Yeah,
and we are not done with the design.
No, we're not done.
Correct?
And we wouldn't be in any, every project needs to go through design development. So it's just part of a building project. It would be the same if you were building a house.
So this is still in the process.
This is still in the process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janice.
Something I would add to that.
Oh, sorry. Vanessa?
My name is Vanessa Vercade. I'm chair of the library trustees and I'm chair of the library building study committee, and have been involved in this needs assessment and really evaluating what Kingston needs and what this building provides and doesn't provide, and what this building also needs. Part of the process of the design grant was that we needed to get a lot of input from the town, and we needed to write a library building program. It's sort of like if you're going to build a house, you know you want a kitchen, you know you want some bedrooms, you know you need closets in those bedrooms, you know you need, whatever. From the input that we got from the town and what other libraries the committee went out and looked at, we put together that, our community needs this much children's space because that percentage of our population, and that's really a community we want to serve. And children, it goes from birth to 12-year-olds. Well, you can't have the babies playing in the same place that the 12-year-olds are, you know, so to really kind of delineate a children's space, a young adult space, a quiet space, a collection space, because as we've said, we don't have enough space for the collection for this size community. So changes are possible as long as we stay with sort of the blueprint of what we said the community needs in their library. And this is online on the webpage if you want to read it. But that's the one thing that we have to always be true to, is that we have to make sure and what we've asked to be in this building will be there. How we encase it is you know, yeah, I think we're having a really hard time defining what this space needs as a Kingston property.
So that's why we need your input. And I just want to say that in addition to the building program that Vanessa showed you, if you have any interest in looking at the grant application itself, it's a really thick binder on the back table, and you can see what went into it, and there's a lot there. So you're welcome to take a look at that.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, Bob King. As I understand it, the state has a bond of $150 million, and we've been granted 6.9. Was that based on population, or was there some other criteria to arrive at that particular amount?
So, yeah.
So first of all, what they did with the first part of the 150 million was they took care of the projects that had been on a waiting list from the last grant round in 2011, I think. So that's where the first part of it went. Every community that submitted a grant application had to submit detailed project costs, so construction costs, but also all the other related costs. In our case, cost of temporary quarters and all of those things. So the Mass Board of Library Commissioners Grant Review Committee, which was a pretty intensive process and a pretty intensive committee, they looked at every project, they vetted the project, they vetted the numbers, and then they used a formula to determine which certain costs are eligible, certain costs are not eligible for the grant. So they used a formula to figure out what percentage of the eligible costs would be covered. That's what determined the size of the grant for each community.
So it's really based on our proposal.
Yeah, it's based on our proposal.
Okay. And at the special town meeting coming up, I think it was November 14th?
November 14th.
And we'll have the report for the Finance Committee for that?
Yeah, and I hope well before that.
Okay.
I don't know whether they're going to vote on it next Tuesday, but they had been waiting until they had some tax numbers from the treasurer, which they now have.
Okay.
At least that's my understanding of why the timing is what it is. But anyway, next Thursday we'll be meeting with them, and maybe we'll have their decision.
And is that vote going to, is that a 2/3 vote, or is that a majority vote?
At town meeting, it's a 2/3 majority. The ballot vote would be a simple majority.
And the ballot's in December?
Ballot's in December 5th. And I think everybody here is a town meeting goer, but if you're not, you need to know you need to be in the room to vote.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Bill Mello. I look at it, the town meeting coming up on the 14th, and from a little bit of experience on building, the space program that was developed led to a schematic plan given the site here, and an area was developed, and I suspect a price was developed from that area. It had not, in as much as you don't have an exterior, it is almost impossible to develop a full price of a building. There will be, I trust, some limitations on your materials, your energy consumption, et cetera, to develop a building that is supposed to meet with the energy savings and such. So I just feel there's some gaps to be settled from what I'm hearing. And my hearing may not be that good, which I'm sure of. But the point I'm trying to make, it's going to be a tough sell. Okay, so we have to fill in the gaps.
Thank you. Yes. What I can tell you is that the design was developed far enough and materials specified far enough so that there could be a detailed cost estimate, and that cost estimate is part of the grant application. So you're very welcome to look at that. I don't know whether I can fill in more detail about how that was arrived at, but I can say that even though the project, the actual massing of the building isn't fully determined, it was taken far enough to do a good cost estimate. That said, the eventual building has to stay within the numbers we have. So there's not going to be another ask to the town. The architect and OPM are not here today, but they will be at town meeting. So that would be a further chance to ask that sort of question. But I'm happy to get you more information if you'd like me to do that. So if I can get your contact information, I'll get in touch with you to find out more specifically what you need to know. Thank you.
And I think it'll just be interesting to know, too, where you have a background in construction. That big binder probably has a couple of the answers you might be looking for. So you may want to, can they take the binder home? Probably not, huh? But it might be fun reading for somebody with your background. I don't know that I'd enjoy it. We have a couple more questions. Yes, right here in the front. Yes, ma'am.
Dorothy Pat Harlow, 3 Pebble Lane, Kingston, Massachusetts. Again, I'd like to thank you for the diligence and the effort and the time that you and your team have put into this. Massive, absolutely massive. I know that just from experience. I'd like to address the $6.5 million. Do I understand the criteria of the grant that in order for the state to refund or give the grant to the town has to initially pay $6.5 million out on the money that's borrowed?
So go ahead, Sia, and then I'll have some thoughts.
You actually might be able to answer this better than I can, or Karen might be able to answer it better than I can. The town treasurer has proposed, so first of all, there has to be a commitment to the local funding in order for the for the town to enter into a contract with the state. The town has to, and Ken Stevens has done a really thorough job of looking to see when expenditures would come up in the project and when grant disbursements would be expected. So he's done a cash flow, working with the owner's project manager. He's done a cash flow about when funds are needed, and based on that, he has come up with a proposal of some short-term borrowing to get through some initial stages, followed by permanent borrowing of a couple of years out. I can't explain that proposal to you, but I can tell you that he has tried to do it in such a way that it is the very least impact on the town and the least debt possible.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand, is there an overlapping between like the budget that the town spends and the delegation of the money from the state? Or do I hear that no matter how it's done, there would be no reimbursement to the town until the 6.5 commitment of the town is met, and then the state will jump in and reimburse the town?
Oh, I see what you're asking.
Yeah.
No, that's not the way it works. In fact, as soon as the town signs a contract with the state, the first disbursement comes
From
through.
the state?
Right,
Very well, thank you.
right.
I was just conferring with Sia. My recollection, and it's now been a long time since I've been up on Beacon Hill, is that they usually disperse it in 3 or 4 different time periods. So they take the money that's owed and will give you a quarter of it, and then a quarter of it, and then a quarter of it, and then a quarter of it. So towns sometimes are able to schedule some of it so that they're using more state money up front than town money, which is always a good strategy.
And just to finish, that bank will never empty from the state. The 6.5 will never not be.
It won't. I can tell you that because they've borrowed it.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, and I'm sure Ken is doing the research, I haven't chatted with him about this, but as we know, borrowing costs are still at a relative all-time low. They've gone up a little bit with the interest rate increases of the Fed recently, but many of us will recall borrowing at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14%. You know, the fact that you can borrow at 3, 4% right now is pretty remarkable. In the town, as Sia was mentioning, we'll put it on a schedule so they're only borrowing when they need to borrow and not borrowing prematurely. I know this gentleman has been very patient. Yes. The handsome gentleman in the back row.
Steve Clinch. I'm a 19-year resident.
So a newbie. I'm kidding. I'm just
Newbie.
teasing.
Yeah, not in this category.
Very few of us are in that category.
One would expect that the character of libraries is going to change quite a bit over the next 20 years, that it's going to move more in the direction of digital media and less in the direction of hard copy, printed media over that period of time. Has there been discussion or provisions made in the design discussion to account for the fact that that change is likely to take place?
I can check that off my list of questions. Sia?
Absolutely, there's been discussion. I think that, so one thing is we are trying to design a building that is as flexible as possible so that we can change with, we can adapt as things change. One thing that has surprised me, though, is that although there's a perception that people aren't reading in print that much anymore, on paper that much anymore, actually that's not the case, which is so interesting to me. I mentioned a while ago that millennials were the most likely adult population to have used a public library, which was fascinating to learn. A few years ago, we were working on a strategic plan, and I went and visited the students at the middle school and the high school and learned from them what their preferences were. And they are, a lot of them are very interested in reading on paper. It depends on what they're reading. So they're like, I would say, the rest of the population, that there are people who read exclusively digitally. There are people who read exclusively on paper, but more and more there are people who do both. So yes, we're taking into account that what we call the physical collections probably won't keep growing at the rate that they are now. I don't expect to see them disappear, but all of those things are part of what we're talking about with the design of the building. And beyond just how people read, it's how people use information, it's how people work together, how people collaborate, how people learn, how people get trained. So all of those things are things we're thinking about as we try to make the building as flexible as possible.
One of the things that's been fascinating to me, and I'm actually the last year of the baby boom, believe it or not, the very last year is when I was born, is that education itself is changing. And people are doing a lot of online education, even to the college level, the collegiate level. And so it strikes me that communities that have those resources available to allow people to further their education in an environment that is conducive will be those communities that are a little bit ahead of the curve. And so it's a good point. Any project like this is oftentimes a hard sell, but there are a couple interesting factors here. One, a community is judged by many things: its educational opportunities, its resources, its town, its character. I would suggest the resources it has for its citizens is one of them. The library is one, and that the state has come in and looked at the proposal and looked at the town and done its review and determined that what the town of Kingston has is currently inadequate, significantly inadequate, so much so that it put us to the top of a list of a number of communities that said, we need a new library. And they said, well, you may think you need a new library, but Kingston really does need a new library. And so I can tell you that's an interesting thought process for the state to go through. They don't do this lightly. The review is very rigorous. I can't imagine how many meetings Sia and the team had to go through to come to that conclusion. And so it's a little concerning. It's great news that we're at the top of the list, but to me, it's a little concerning that we're at the top of the list because other people are looking at the town and saying, you have a really inadequate resource here, and we're willing to offer some financial support. Don't forget, too, the money that the state has already borrowed and is already paying interest on doesn't come to us in a fashion that we continue to have to pay interest on that money. So the state is giving us that money interest-free. The money we put in will obviously have interest that you have to pay on it, and it's a cost that this team has already considered. Again, I've been terribly impressed with the workload of the crew here to have those resources. I know they wish they had every answer, but you can't in a project of this scope and length. But they have a lot, and you've been great to listen to a lot of that information. If there are no other questions, I know Sia really wanted time for the tour and that opportunity. As I mentioned, there will be another session at 6:30. If you want to come back, we'd love to have you. I'd love to see those familiar smiling faces. The last thing I did want to say in conclusion, and this impressed me too, you probably are aware that the Library Foundation, the group of folks responsible for some of the capital work here, has already done and has started a capital campaign to support this effort. And I know they have a goal. And Sia, what is the goal that they have in mind to fundraising?
The goal is $500,000.
So that in and of itself is remarkable because not only is the town looking at this and getting resources and putting together a package, but they're working hard on the ground level to offer that type of support. I don't see that in a lot of other communities, so I'm pretty pleased, proud, and impressed that it's happening here in the town of Kingston. And I'm sure I'll get my solicitation in the mail, and I'll have to send in my contribution. So, folks, thank you very much. You have been exceedingly patient, particularly with me. I know that the team here appreciates all of your support, and I think, if nothing else, they deserve a huge round of applause from all of us. So, thank you very, very much. So, without further ado, I think Sia is going to begin the tour.
Yeah, so anybody who would like to go with me through the building, I will go get my keys because there's one part of the building I need keys for, and I'll meet you. I'll meet you in this room, and we'll start from here in a few minutes. Thank you so much for coming and for asking questions. This is the meeting room. We allow people to use this after hours. They have access to the meeting room and restrooms, but not to the rest of the building. And it gets quite a lot of use that way. We certainly use the room for library programs, but we also use it, community members use it quite a lot, and we use it for meetings and various things. We are fortunate to be able to sit about 45 people in this room, as long as, with chairs in rows, but you'll know, I think some people will know the South Shore Locavores program and the author series that we've been doing with the Council on Aging. Both of those series started in this room, but we outgrew the room, and so we had to move the programs off-site. We've been really happy to have the use of the Council on Aging and to collaborate with them, but it's not a good thing to be forced out of a room because it's too small. So we're hoping that in the new building, well, definitely in the new building, the plan is for a much larger meeting room and program room. Okay, so this is the children's room, which is quite an attractive room. It's also quite crowded, and you'll see that there are people trying to use the room in a variety of ways. Some of them require concentration, kids doing homework, tutors working with students, people working on serious homework assignments, and then there are also kids playing and lots of people talking. So in the new building, what we're hoping for is space that's large enough to accommodate both quiet and active use of the room. And one thing you'll notice over here is that the play area right here, where we hold lots of story times, is also a traffic route. So you have to walk from the entrance to the children's room right through the play area to get to the other parts of the building. Another thing I'd call your attention to is the height of the stacks that really do not provide good supervision of this space. It's too tall for children. So another hope is that in the new building we will be looking at much larger floor space and be able to lower the height of the stacks somewhat too. This part of the library is heavily used for programs, and so we have two rooms over here. One is the children's librarian's office, and the other is a program room, which gets quite a lot of use. I think if you peek in there now, you'll see a program going on. But also, it's a little bit limited in use because you can't see into it very far, which makes some people hesitant to go in there and use it for, say, quiet study or for tutoring. People like to have visibility, and that room just doesn't have it. There are also some atmosphere problems with it. This whole building is controlled by 3 rooftop units. The heating and air conditioning is 3 rooftop units, and it doesn't work that well for some of these satellite rooms. They get very cold or very hot different times of year, which makes them a little hard to use. And then I will also point out that the whole inner courtyard is surrounded by a glass curtain wall. 2 of those walls are original to the 1971 telephone building, and 2 of the walls were installed in 1994 when we remodeled this building to be a library. They leak, they are inefficient for heating and cooling, and they definitely contribute to the high humidity levels throughout the building. So this area is a crosswalk from the children's room to the adult area. It serves multiple purposes. You can see somebody trying to study here. People use it quite a lot for that. But it's also used to house our books on CD collection. It's also used as a gallery, and it also serves as a raceway for toddlers. So it's not really conducive to studying, although it is one of the few relatively quiet areas of the library. This area houses the entire adult collection and also the adult computers. It's pretty tight. You can see down here that there are shelves that we added that weren't part of the original shelving plan. They serve the purpose of helping us house more of the collection. However, they also put pressure on the rest of the room so that you can see that if a chair is left pulled out from the table, it's very hard for anybody to get through who has mobility problems. So somebody in a wheelchair couldn't get through that area. The shelves are mostly full to the top and bottom shelves are full throughout most of the building. We do what we call in libraries, we do weed the collection very intensively to try to stay within the space we have, but it really requires that we keep on pulling out books that aren't used anymore or that are in poor condition, things like that, and we do that continually to make room for the books that are coming in. That's something we just do all times of year. This is an example of how space limitations have led us to shelve things in a way that really isn't very logical, and it makes it somewhat hard for people to find things. This is the CD collection that really is an outgrowth of the full CD collection that's in the next room. The paperbacks similarly go from one wall to another, and it was, we try to weed this collection heavily, but these books are all used. So we don't want to get rid of things that people are still actively using. So this is an area that was never intended to be a staff space, but because we don't have enough desks and office space for our library staff, it has become a staff space, and it's not really conducive to concentrated work for somebody who's trying to work there and people are coming by and asking questions. She does the best she can, but it's not ideal for that. This room was originally intended to be one room that housed the entire AV collection. So back then it was VHS tapes, and I think we still had some LPs and audio cassettes, and the formats have changed, but the collection has not gotten any smaller. But what we didn't have was a proper space for teenagers, and so what we did was divide this space in half to carve out a teen space. You can see that it's very crowded. It's not really a place where kids can sit and socialize at all. It is a place where they can browse the collection, but it's not really a good study space either. And when I went to visit the high school kids and middle school kids a couple of years ago as we were gathering information for planning, I learned from the kids that not only do they still like to read books in print for many reasons, they also like to hang out together and have a place to socialize. And we don't have that to offer them, and I wish we did. This is another area where we've added shelves. They do help us to house more of the collection, but you can see it makes it maybe not quite in violation of the ADA code, but very close to it, and it makes it difficult for people to navigate the stacks if they have any kind of mobility problems. The rooms back here were not remodeled when we did the 1994 conversion to a library, and that was for budget reasons. The problem with the rooms is that they are below grade, and it would have been very expensive to remodel them. The town at the time spent $1.2 million on remodeling the library, and that just wasn't in the budget. So these two rooms were left alone. We use one room mostly for storage of equipment, building supplies, things like that. This room over here we use for storage of parts of the collection that don't fit on the regular shelves. And as you can see, because you had to come down a couple of stairs, neither of these rooms is accessible to people with mobility issues. And currently on our library staff, we have 2 people with mobility issues who cannot get down these stairs either at all or easily. And that's important for a number of reasons. One of them is that this part here is where we shelve materials that we can't fit on our regular shelves. And they're all in the catalog, so people are aware that they're here, and we come out here multiple times a day to pull things off these shelves for people. That shouldn't be that way. People should be able to just freely get to the materials, but also 2 of our staff are limited from coming out here. So this is an area that clearly is an ADA and access problem. The rest of this room is primarily used for by the Friends of the Library to store the many donations of books that come in, and they save what we don't use in the collection, they save for their book sale. And so that's how this room is used. So this is the main browsing area. You can see that it's a nice wide open space, except that it's also used for a lot of different reasons. always have exhibits here. So people sit in here, read newspapers, browse the new book collections, browse the magazines, socialize. It gets a lot of use. It's a very active space. It's a good thing it's as wide as it is because we can fit a lot in there, but at times it's just too congested for all the things we're trying to do in there. This is what we call the technical services room. It's the area where most of the behind-the-scenes action takes place in the library. Deliveries come in here. People are doing book ordering here, processing things in here. You can see this table here, which is really full right now. That's where both deliveries of book orders come in, but also where we accept donations of used books that we either will put into our collection or we will give them to the Friends of the Library to sell in their book sale. We try our best to keep up with it, but it's a steady volume, and so it's hard to keep up with it, and consequently the room gets pretty crowded. The room was designed to hold 3 staff desks, and it now holds 5, and that's pretty evident. Again, this is an issue, this is a part of the building where there are real safety issues, especially for people with mobility problems. And again, we have 2 people on staff currently who do have mobility problems. It's not a safe room for them. We're behind the circulation desk here, and this is where we shelve things that are waiting for people to pick up. We also shelve things that are waiting to be reshelved. One of the issues that we have is that frequently there isn't room on the regular shelves for things that need to be reshelved, and so sometimes a volunteer will pile up the cart, take it over to the shelf where it's supposed to live, and have to bring it back again because there's no room on that shelf. So these shelves are frequently really full, and frequently with stuff that's just been sitting there for a long time. This is also where we receive deliveries from other libraries. This is called Interlibrary Loan, and we do a lot of getting books from other libraries for people, and we also send our materials to other libraries. All of that happens in this space.